The illusion of her love. It started on a night much like any other. The kind of night when the stars seem to shine a little brighter and everything in the world feels at peace. But for me, that night marked the beginning of a quiet storm I never saw coming. I was sitting in the small, dimly lit cafe we always frequented. The smell of freshly ground coffee lingered in the air, and I could hear the soft hum of conversations around me. But none of that mattered. I turned off my phone and shoved it into my pocket. The words from Sarah lingered in my mind. Can we meet again? But I pushed them away as best as I could. I couldn't let myself fall back into that pit of despair. Not again. It was clear now, more than ever, that I couldn't let myself be that naive, that trusting, that foolish again. I stood up from the railing, the cold metal biting against my hands. The city stretched out below me like a maze of lights and shadows, each flicker of neon a reminder that life moved on, even when your heart shattered. The world didn't stop, even when you were drowning in pain. People passed by on the streets, wrapped in their own little lives, their own little dramas, oblivious to the storm raging in my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My fingers still trembled, my breath still shallow. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to fix this broken version of myself that Sarah had left behind? The guilt in her eyes, the fake apology, the relief in her voice when she confessed. It was all too much to bear. She didn't regret what she'd done. She regretted that I found out. She didn't care about losing me. No, she cared about losing her safety net, her comfort. I wasn't her priority anymore. I wasn't even in the picture. That's what hurt the most. I tried to focus on the present. The cold wind cut through my jacket, forcing me to pull my sleeves tighter around my wrists. I couldn't afford to keep thinking about Sarah. I couldn't let her take up any more space in my mind, in my heart. But every time I tried to move forward, her voice, her laugh, the way she used to look at me, like I was the only one in the room, came rushing back. I was still trapped in her illusion of love, but no more. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. She had already taken enough. I needed to regain control of my life. But where to start? I walked aimlessly through the city, not sure where I was going, but needing to be away from that rooftop. I didn't want to go home. The place we shared, the space where I thought we were building a future together, was no longer a place of refuge. It felt like a tomb, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The streets blurred as I walked, lost in my thoughts. People bumped into me, their hurried steps a sharp contrast to my sluggish pace. I was moving through life, but I wasn't really living. Every part of me was still reeling from her betrayal, from the lies she had fed me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being completely and utterly alone. She had made it clear. She had moved on long before she confessed. As I passed a park bench, I paused. The city was still awake, but I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I sat down, resting my head in my hands. I needed to stop, just for a moment. The pain felt so overwhelming. How did I end up here? How did I let myself be taken in by someone who never truly loved me? I felt the tears start to prick at the corners of my eyes, but I pushed them down. Crying wouldn't bring her back. Crying wouldn't change anything. She had made her choice, and I had to respect that, no matter how much it hurt. The silence around me felt like a heavy weight. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of leaves, the occasional murmur of voices from a group walking by. But nothing could drown out the deafening quiet inside me. "Hey, are you okay?" I looked up, startled. A man in his mid-30s stood before me, a kind smile on his face. He had probably been walking by and noticed the look on my face, the kind of expression that spoke volumes even when words failed. It was a look that only those who had been through real pain could recognize. I shook my head, unable to speak at first. What was I supposed to say? That my heart had been ripped out by the one person I thought I could trust? That everything I had believed in for the past few years had been a lie? "I'll be fine," I managed, though it didn't feel true. Not at all. The words came out as more of a whisper, a plea to myself, rather than a statement of fact. The man nodded, as though he understood. "I'm sorry you're going through something tough." He paused, then added, "But I promise you this, it gets easier. It doesn't feel like it now, but it will. Just give yourself time to breathe." I looked at him, a little taken aback by his kindness. How could he know what I was going through? How could anyone? "Thanks," I said, managing a small smile. It was weak, barely there, but it was the most I could muster. The man nodded and walked off, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me with my thoughts again. I sat there for what felt like hours, but it was only a few minutes. The words he'd spoken echoed in my mind. It gets easier. I wasn't sure if I believed it yet, but something in me clung to that hope. I couldn't keep living in this broken state. I had to rebuild. I had to rediscover who I was outside of Sarah. I stood up, taking one last look at the park before I began walking again. This time, I had a destination. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I couldn't keep going down this path of self-doubt and pain. I had to break free. I walked past the familiar streets, past the stores we used to visit, the restaurants we used to love. Every corner held a memory, but I refused to let them drown me. I wasn't going to let the past define me. I wasn't going to let Sarah define me. Eventually, I ended up at the pier. It was quiet here, the gentle lapping of the waves against the rocks a soothing sound. I sat on one of the benches, the cold air biting at my skin. It felt good. The quiet, the space. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt like I could breathe. And as I sat there, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and pink, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But I would heal. I would find myself again. I wouldn't let the illusion of her love dictate my future. It was time to let go. For now, I would take it one step at a time. I would move on. And maybe someday, I would learn to trust again. But for now, I would just breathe. And that was enough. My world was collapsing, and I had no idea how to stop it. I sat across from her, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to act like everything was normal. But deep down, I could feel the cold chill of something being wrong. I had been with Sarah for 3 years, 3 years of laughter, love, and promises that felt unbreakable. But lately, something had changed. She seemed distant, her smile no longer reached her eyes, and her words felt hollow, like they were rehearsed. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt it, a creeping suspicion that gnawed at my insides every time we were together. "Hey," I said, my voice betraying the nervousness I was trying to hide. "Is everything okay? You've been off lately." She looked up at me, her eyes flickering for just a moment before she gave me a half-smile. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her soul, and I felt my stomach twist in response. I had known her long enough to recognize the signs, the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the way her eyes avoided mine when I asked about something serious. But I didn't want to confront it. I didn't want to believe that anything was wrong. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice soft but distant. "Just tired, you know? Work has been stressful." I nodded, trying to push down the rising tide of doubt. But something about her response didn't sit right with me. It was too rehearsed, too perfect, like she had prepared it in advance. I knew her better than that. The woman I loved would never give me such an empty answer. As we sat there in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, I noticed something on her wrist, a small bracelet. It was delicate, silver with a charm I didn't recognize. She had never worn it before. I didn't ask about it, not yet, but the question lingered in the back of my mind. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Sarah," I said quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Is there something you're not telling me?" She froze, her hand instinctively going to her wrist, touching the bracelet. For a split second, her eyes met mine, and in that brief moment, I saw the truth, the hesitation, the fear, the guilt. It was there, plain as day, and it shattered me more than I could ever put into words. I don't know how to say this," she whispered, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, and the world around me seemed to blur, as though I was drowning in a sea of confusion and pain. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say it was a joke, to tell me it was all in my head. But she didn't. She didn't take it back. My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest, piece by piece. The woman I had loved, the one I had trusted, had betrayed me. And the worst part was, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't sorry, not really. She wasn't apologizing for hurting me, for lying to me. She was apologizing because she knew I'd found out. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know, but I couldn't stop myself. Her gaze dropped to the table, her fingers fidgeting with the bracelet again. She didn't speak for a long time, and when she did, the words felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "His name is James," she said softly. "I met him a few months ago, and I don't know how it happened. It just did." I nodded, my mind racing. "A few months ago. That was when everything had started to change. That was when I had noticed the distance growing between us. I had been blind, too trusting, too willing to ignore the signs, to believe that everything was fine. But now it was clear. She had been slipping away, and I hadn't seen it. I couldn't even look at her anymore. The woman I had shared everything with, the one I had been loyal to, was gone. In her place was someone who had shattered the trust one had built with her, someone who had chosen someone else over me. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of guilt and uncertainty, but there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't regret, not the kind I expected. It was more like relief, as if telling me was a burden she'd been carrying, and now, with the truth out in the open, she could breathe again. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, and my hands clenched into fists beneath the table. I couldn't make sense of it. The woman I thought I knew, my partner, my confidant, had done this to me. I thought we had something real, something unbreakable. How could she have been seeing someone else behind my back? And for months? The silence between us grew heavy. It felt suffocating, and I could hardly stand the weight of it. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask every question that had been gnawing at me for months. But I couldn't bring myself to. All I could do was stare at her, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. "I'm sorry, Jake," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what happened. It just happened." That's what they all say, I thought bitterly. It just happened. There's always an excuse, always a reason for why people betray you. But in the end, it's just an excuse. An excuse for something unforgivable. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor with an awful sound. The air between us felt too thick, and I needed to escape it. I needed to get away from her. From this. From the reality of everything that was falling apart. I looked down at her, and for a moment, I saw her eyes. The eyes that once held so much love and trust, and I saw the emptiness there now. It wasn't that she didn't care, it was just that she didn't care enough to make things right. I turned and walked away, not saying another word, not trusting myself to. Outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The world seemed so normal, people walking by, cars rushing down the street, but everything had changed. In the span of a few minutes, my life had been flipped upside down. I couldn't stop shaking, and I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving, had to get away from her. I wanted to break down, to cry, to scream. I wanted to throw something, to hit something, to make this pain go away. But I didn't. I kept walking, my legs carrying me aimlessly through the city, my thoughts a whirlwind. How long had she been lying to me? How long had I been a fool, believing in something that wasn't real? I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, her words echoing in my ears. "I'm sorry," she had said. Sorry for what? Sorry that she'd been caught? Sorry that I had to find out the truth? I stumbled through the streets, my head pounding, my chest tight with the weight of the betrayal. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. All I could do was feel the crushing pain of what she had done to me. Hours passed, and I found myself on the rooftop of an old building, staring out at the city below. The lights twinkled in the distance, and for a brief moment, I wondered what I had done wrong. What had I missed? I thought we had something real. I thought she loved me. But love wasn't enough, was it? Not when someone else could come along and make her forget everything we had. Not when someone else could fill the space I thought was just for me. I leaned against the railing, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't stay here, couldn't stay in this city with these memories of a love I thought would last forever. Everything I had built, everything I had trusted, had been ripped from under me. I couldn't even look at her anymore, not without feeling sick. And then, as if in some cruel twist of fate, my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out, almost afraid to see who it was. It was her. "Jake, please, I need to talk. I'm sorry. Can we meet again?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to respond, to hear her side of things, to understand how she could justify what she had done. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being lied to, tired of being used, wanted to delete the message and move on with my life. I wasn't sure how to respond. I wasn't sure if I ever would. The woman I had loved had shattered me. And no matter how many times she apologized, no matter how many times she begged for forgiveness, I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. Not after what she had done. The love I had given her, the trust one had placed in her, all of it felt like it meant nothing now. And no amount of apologies could erase the hurt. It was over. I typed a response, my hands trembling slightly as I hit send. "It's too late, Sarah. It's over." I stared at the screen for a moment longer before turning off my phone. I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. It was time to let go, to heal, to move on. And maybe, someday, I would learn to trust again. But for now, all I had was this broken heart and the silence that came with it. A few weeks passed before I started to feel that my soul could breathe again. And although it was still hard, I began to notice how my heart was slowly healing from the blow. It's like trying to learn how to walk again after your legs have been broken. It hurts, but you can't give up trying. I often thought about all those moments when I was with her. She seemed so real, so close. I truly believed she was my happiness. And now, after everything that happened, I saw how it was all just an illusion. My trust in her was like a light I had lit at dawn, and then it went out, leaving me in the dark. All those days when I didn't want to leave the house, when I squeezed out the last bit of strength to find even a little motivation to move forward, became part of my past. I decided that I didn't want to be who I was then anymore. Sometimes, I even wanted to go back to my old habits, sitting at home, avoiding people, hiding from the world so I wouldn't face any more pain. But I knew that wasn't the way. I started going for morning runs. At first, I could barely run a couple of kilometers without feeling like my heart was about to tear apart from the effort. But every day, I became stronger, although I didn't feel the physical pain that could have protected me. My pain remained internal. There were no visible marks, but it was there, constantly reminding me of itself. During one of these runs, I met Dina. She was a new acquaintance, a friend of a friend, and we happened to end up in the same training group. She was always calm and confident, silent, but with a certain warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. She resembled what I was looking for, but I wasn't ready to find it yet. I was afraid of closeness. I was afraid that she would become another reflection of the pain I experienced with Sarah. But her support was different. She didn't demand anything from me, just that I stay myself. She didn't ask about my past, didn't pry for details. She was just there when I needed her. And that became an important step in my recovery. After a few weeks, our meetings became regular. We started talking not just during training. Dina was attentive, but not pushy. She felt that I wasn't ready for a new relationship yet, and she didn't try to force me into anything. She was a loyal friend, and that was important. And still, even after all this time, I couldn't forget Sarah. Her image haunted me in my dreams, even when I thought I had let her go. I began to understand that everything I feared was that I couldn't forgive myself for letting her get so close. The thought tortured me that I could have acted differently. I could have been stronger. I could have seen her lies sooner, but it wasn't that simple. I tried not to think about it, but at the moment when thoughts began to return to her, I felt my heart tighten. It was a process that had no end. I decided that despite all my emotions, I would move forward. I wouldn't look back. Months passed, and I became someone else. Dina remained my friend, but it was becoming harder and harder to hide that I felt more for her. I was afraid to take that step and lose her as a friend, as the person who had always been there. But the more I talked to her, the more I felt that I wanted something more than just friendship. I knew it was difficult. My history with Sarah left deep scars, and I was afraid to fall into the same thing again. But was Dina the one I was looking for? Was I ready for a new relationship? The fear I felt was my constant companion. One evening, after a long conversation with Dina about all the struggles I'd been through, she just looked at me and said, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself. And if you need more time, I'll understand. I just want you to know that I'm here." These words were both comforting and harsh at the same time. They made me realize that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't let my fears, my doubts once again control my life. I decided that I had to go through with this. I had to learn to let go and move forward. Gradually, I began to open up more, not just to Dina, but to the world around me. I started believing in people again, although it was hard. I began to believe that not everyone was like Sarah, and maybe I deserved something better. It wasn't an easy path, but eventually, I realized that the most important thing was not to let betrayal, pain, and loss define who I was. I stayed who I was, no matter what had happened. And if I respected myself, if I believed in myself, I would find a way to true happiness.